Hi, folks. So, just to review, last time we talked in class about King Louis XIV, who built the Palace of Versailles, and how rich and powerful France was at that time. But we also talked about how the king at the time of the French Revolution, King Louis XVI, and his wife Marie Antoinette were actually not very engaged as rulers and were spending a lot of time partying and spending money. And did not have the popularity or the support or even seem godlike to the people of France. And we also talked about the three estates or three levels of society in France, the way in which the king was at the top, at the church and the nobility, the first and second estates, were able to collect taxes, were able to own land, were able to control everything and benefit from everything, but paid no taxes and had no responsibilities in terms of producing for the country. And so that responsibility fell entirely on the third estate, which was serfs, people who were basically the property of the king and property of the land, and a small group of folks who had freed themselves from that situation and were called the bourgeoisie. Maybe they started a small business or something and they were trying to work their way up, but they were paying taxes, they couldn't own land, they were sort of stuck. And hopefully in the reading that you just did, you began to see how this was really falling apart. There were successive problems with the harvest, floods and disasters that caused the harvest to be really bad 5 years in a row. People were starving, children were dying before they could be old enough to work. The nobility and the church were spending money like crazy. What you may not have read yet is that the king was also spending money like crazy. He was investing in the United States War of Independence, an expensive prospect that didn't really gain France very much, other than bragging rights. And he was spending money on other wars, and he was spending money on his own extravagance. And the country wasn't producing enough revenue to cover that. So the King of France was seriously in debt, and the financial structure of the country was coming apart at the seams. So this is all the buildup, and something else to notice is that the American Revolution happened, and people began to see that a king could be overthrown, that a country could be operated without a king. Also, all the philosophers that we read about were being read and discussed by those in France who were illiterate, and people were talking about ideas like human beings have brains, kings don't come from God, we have the right to choose our ruler, we have the expectation of certain basic rights to life and liberty. Those kind of ideas were running through the population like wildfire at the same time as so many people were starving. So all of this led to a preconditions of a revolution. Ultimately, though, the king needed to raise more money and wanted to raise taxes even more at the worst possible time. And rather than do this in a time when the population was in an uprising without their permission, he decided to seek sort of a fake permission from the people by inviting the people to send representatives and to compile their grievances and attend a meeting of the three estates in the palace at Versailles. And so people elected representatives at a local level. They wrote lists and lists and lists of their problems, also known as grievances. And those representatives went to the Palace of Versailles to discuss. When they arrived, they found a king who wasn't actually interested in listening and who signaled in a million ways that he was going to shut them down and proceed with his plans to raise taxes without any alteration or consideration of what the people had to say. And that led to this incident, which is depicted here in this picture. Shut out of the meeting, the members of the third estate, the representatives of the serfs and the bourgeoisie, lock themselves into a tennis court. When they say tennis here in French, what they really mean is squash or handball. These are like walls, that you would hit a ball against and it would come back to you. So the king had one of these rooms in the palace, and being locked out of the main meeting, the members of the Third Estate went there and they locked themselves in. And they said, you know what, we're not going to come out of this place until the king gives us the right to a new government. And they began discussing what sort of a new government they wanted. So this is an act of revolution. They were saying the whole system wasn't working for them, and they were going to take matters into their own hands and describe a government that would work. Obviously, the king could have just busted in there with his military and shot everyone and slaughtered them. Why is that not a strategic move? Because maybe people all over France would have taken that as a symbol to rise up. So the king decided to kind of delay. He said, "Okay, y'all, you talk, you write. I'll listen. Yeah, go ahead." It's sort of the equivalent of saying, "Sure, I'll send in some pizza. Let me know what you have to say." But he's holding the time for him to think about what to do next. Some members of the clergy, as you can see here, went and joined in that conversation. So that just lets you know that the nobility and the clergy were not like unified in their support of the king. And out of this meeting comes a document that we call the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, which we'll study in class. The vision that the French Third Estate representatives had for what kind of government they wanted. Meanwhile, in Paris, 12 miles away, the people of the capital city, mostly bourgeoisie, people who had a little more education, a little more information about what was going on, they realized that it was only a matter of time before the king would go into that room and just kill everyone and shut this thing down. And so the only way, in their view, to preserve this building revolution was to defend the new document that was being written and the people who were writing it with military arms. So the people of Paris took what they had, their kitchen knives, their fence posts, their shovels, and they went to the place where they knew there was weapons. And that was this famous prison called the Bastille. The Bastille had political prisoners and people who had been arrested for stealing bread, the whole range of folks who were out of favor with the king. And it also had a huge garrison with, military folks and weapons for the purpose, obviously, of keeping the prisoners from rioting, I guess. So think of it as like if you were going to have a revolution here in Albany, where's the guns? It's in the police station, right? But they went, the people of Paris, and basically took the police station with their bare hands. And what you see them here is like some fence posts and some metal sticks that they've taken off of the barriers in Paris, but that's even a little romantic. It was really just like a mass human rush that kept coming and coming and coming, and people were slaughtered by the prison guards, but there were so many people coming that eventually the people of Paris actually killed the prison guards, took the weapons, handed them out to each other, and sent off their, whoever knew how to use a gun, they sent to Versailles to defend the revolution and to defend the new document that was being written. And so Bastille Day, the storming of the Bastille by the people, that is, and the freeing of all the prisoners. So this is like the original anti-police brutality movement here. Yeah. That day becomes the French national holiday because it symbolizes the moment when people took things into their own hands and decided to defend this idea of a new government with their bodies. And it symbolizes their victory, their amazing victory against a much better armed opponent. And so we will talk some more about this in class. Thank you for listening.